Don't leave the room because we have another exciting presentation of one of the most nicest people I know, Tudor Damian, with more than 20 years of experience in certified ethical hacker. We'll talk about cybersecurity strategy. This will going to be a half an hour presentation. Again, 5 minutes at the end for the questions. So let's say welcome to Tudor.
All right. Testing 1, 2, 3. Okay. Yep. Good day, everyone. Glad to see such a large number for such a niche topic, I guess, especially since this is not really a developer-focused topic in itself, and that Peter Leeson and Dan Sucha are in the other room. Had I been given a choice, I would have gone to the other session as well. So, welcome everyone. We're going to be spending the next 30-ish minutes or so talking about some tips on how to find a virtual CISO, Chief Information Security Officer, and how to kind of better design a security strategy. It's something that I've been doing personally for a little over 15 years now. So a little bit about me. I am an IT advisor and trainer at, and this is fairly new in my bio, a company called D3 Cyber doing these kinds of things, but I've been doing this in the past as well. I'm also a guild master at the guild hall for the board gamers in the room, so you may have heard of that. Yes, I've seen some of our regulars over there. And maybe you've heard of IT Camp. I was one of the founders of IT Camp, the conference. We kind of stopped when the pandemic hit. Enough about me, though. Let's look at what the topics for today are. So first off, I wanted to start to look at some of the things that are still happening around cybersecurity today, and then look at why a strategy on the cybersecurity side is relevant. A little bit of a talk, or maybe a rant, if you will, on standards and best practices and why you should and when you shouldn't use them as well. Understanding the role of a virtual CISO, or maybe the differences between that and the regular CISO, if you've already got one in your company. And then going through kind of the steps of how to find why you would search for someone to act as a virtual CISO for your company, whether you have or you don't have someone handling that internally. I'll give you some examples towards the very end out of my experience so far, and hopefully there's still some time for questions. So looking at what's going on in the industry, there's a bunch of stuff that happened over the past years that has influenced the world of cybersecurity. And the most obvious thing out there right now is hybrid work. It's the result of the pandemic and kind of forcing a lot of companies to deal with remote work, companies that would not allow or would not even think of allowing that in the past. If you've been to my session at IT Days last year, I talked a bit more about these topics. There's a whole bunch of other stuff going out there. People still don't really know how to use the cloud properly, so there's a lot of issues there. You move to the cloud and then you realize it's not really what you dreamt of, it's not really what the marketing slides have sold you on. The costs are way higher than before and you don't know why and you don't understand and everything's kind of getting out of control. There's shadow IT. That's always been there. It's that part of IT that your IT department doesn't know it's being used. like having your salespeople put together an offer and they want to send an attachment and the attachment's too big, but they figure, hey, I know, I've got WeTransfer. I sent my mother-in-law the photos from our last trip last week, so I can use that, right? So you upload stuff somewhere that's out of the control of your IT, but it's still your company data, so that's shadow IT. Everything about connected devices, digital transformation, the expectations when it comes to developing new apps, like everyone wants things up there yesterday if possible. That's why Agile became a thing in recent years, and that's the discussion in the other room right now, right? Nation-state actors have become a thing as well, and we're really close to a geopolitical situation, let's say, where cybersecurity has played a major factor. And there's some new attacks that have been on the rise, and again, for those of you who've been to my last session, I've talked a little bit about all of the attacks there. One of them, right, was the very last one was synthetic media. And let's take a look at this.
Dear Romanians, I've heard that in your country, when someone runs out of money, they exchange 100 euros. But why don't they exchange $100? My fellow Americans. Did you know that everyone born in Romania is automatically granted a PhD in life? They know everything, are experts in everything, and there's nothing they can't do. Want to build a rocket ship? No problem. The average Romanian can do it with their eyes closed. Need brain surgery? Just ask the nearest Romanian, and they'll have it sorted out in no time. Romanians are never wrong. Even when they appear to be wrong, they're actually right. They can fix anything with duct tape and chewing gum, and they can debate any topic with the confidence of a seasoned politician. They are masters of every craft, from cooking to carpentry to quantum physics. Finally, I would like to thank Maria Iliescu from Suceava for warning me about Bill Gates' plans with vaccines and microchips. I will take actions. God bless Romania.
All right, so this is one example of what current technology can get to. Now, if you hadn't seen the video and just listened to the voice, it would have probably been next to impossible to tell that that's not the real voice. Only if you actually listened to the words and the message, you would have realized that, hey, this may be fake. You might have spotted some glitches in the video, but we're getting really close to a point where it's going to be really, really, really hard to tell apart a real video from a fake one, where you can actually, the voice part was already there and has been there for a longer time than the visual, the video part. But this is becoming more and more of an issue on how to be able to tell what's fake and what's real. There's some statistics here. Basically, last year was as bad as it gets, right? The highest number of everything, of the number of detected attacks, the increase in types of attacks that start from within, right? And the types of malware that gets detected, that's a sign of a data breach, of your network having been compromised and the bad guys putting something there. So there's more and more of that being discovered. There's a record number of zero-day initiative advisories, like a lot of 0 days going on, where even putting out a patch means the bad guys will get whatever code you put out there, they'll reverse engineer it, figure out what you fixed, and then launch an attack on that. And I'll have more details and data on that on the next slide. Cybercrime is on the rise. It's an $8 trillion business nowadays, and it's heading towards 10.5 by 2025. So there's a lot of money in cybersecurity, both on the good side and the bad side. But one of the major issues right now, and this is fairly constant across the industry, there's a lot of open positions that are not filled simply because there's not enough people competent enough to cover the needs of the companies out there. About 50% of the current open positions are still open and will likely remain open because there's a higher demand than the number of specialists on the market. And that's huge. AI, machine learning, that's been a thing, and if you've been here this morning, you've probably heard about some of that. In cybersecurity, those things are actively being used for both attacks and defense. ChatGPT is amazing if you want to hack into stuff. It'll give you the exploit scripts. You just have to ask it nicely. Or circumvent some of the measures they put in place in ChatGPT 4, but you can still do it. It's really easy. It's really easy to just use that to do bad stuff. You can also use it to protect yourself against stuff. I mentioned 0 days, so if you look at the timeline today on how a 0 day works, after a patch is released, it usually takes around 2 weeks for an exploit based on that patch, based on the reverse engineering of that patch, to be out there in the wild, actively being used in attacks. Now, it takes about 60 days for that code to end up on GitHub, and then 2 more months to have tools that are able to detect that attack actually implement the ways to detect said attack. So we're talking about weeks or months between a patch being released, an exploit based on that patch being out there in the wild, and your tools that are out there and meant to detect those kinds of attacks actually doing their jobs. This is why a lot more data breaches have occurred in recent years. Also, the guys at Forbes put together a list of what's likely gonna happen when it comes to cybersecurity this year. They're looking at an increased zero trust adoption. It's gonna be a big year for Secure Access Service Edge. I talked a little bit about that in my session back at IT Days. Targeted ransomware is also becoming a thing. The cyber regulation and their effect on cyber insurance, stuff like they're expecting some major space or airline hacks to happen. They're kind of long overdue by now. The public ones, right? The ones you hear about in the press, not the ones that happen and nobody tells you about them until years later. Like it was with LinkedIn, Dropbox, Uber, you name it. A lot of them have tried to hide things under the carpet. A major crypto event is probably, again, long overdue. So there's a lot of stuff that's usually expected to come or likely to happen. That's why looking at a security strategy is probably a good thing to do. And if you just think of how you handle cybersecurity right now, right? That's kind of your cybersecurity maturity. That's what's going to tell you how mature you are in looking at the issue. And just going beyond installing an antivirus or having some sort of anti-malware, actually looking at your security posture or, I know, trying to identify attacks before they happen, things of that nature. So if you look at this, there's some, the bullets on the slide, there's some essential components of a cybersecurity strategy. Out of this room, who here knows for a fact that either themselves, their team, maybe you're actively working on this, or someone in their company are currently doing all of those things? One hand. Okay, so let's go. It's like what, 9 bullet points? Yes. So who can say for sure that they do 6 out of the 9? One more hand. 3 out of the 9? That's 4 hands total, 5 hands total. I think that's bad. What do you think? I think if you're not doing at least half of those things, let's say, you're just kind of hoping for the best. Let's just hope we're not gonna be hit by an attack. But when it happens, you'd be surprised how easy companies can find the budgets for cybersecurity and for fixing this. I've been involved in a few of these situations myself, so I know all about it. So yes, if you look at the stuff on the slide, that's what's kind of expected out of a cybersecurity strategy. And there's a lot of stuff that you could cover, you should cover, or you should at least consider covering, right? And last but not least, it is also about aligning your business objectives with the strategy itself. Because if you're just building a strategy for the sake of kind of checking some checkboxes somewhere in an audit or whatever, that's not gonna help your business. You need to take a look at why you want to do what you want to do and how can cybersecurity fit in and help you instead of hinder you in achieving those goals, those objectives. So that's very important. Now, when it comes to industry standards and best practices, they do matter, whether you like it or not. It's, so the ancient, well, it kind of works, the Romanian, I guess, merge și așa, right? Like, if it worked yesterday, it will work today, it will work tomorrow. That kind of an expectation might work in many different areas. It does not when it comes to cybersecurity. That's a guarantee. And it's usually not a matter of if you get hacked or attacked, it's when. You're probably being attacked right now, you just don't know about it because you don't have the tools to be able to detect that. You're just lucky that the guys on the other end are just using automated tools to scan your infrastructure and your network, and they're not finding and haven't found anything yet. But even if they did, do you have right now anything in place in your infrastructure, in your applications, to be able to tell that you've been hacked? To be able to tell that someone else got root or admin access on the infrastructure and is changing stuff in the database? Do you have something in place for that? Is your application checking whether the data that it wrote into the database yesterday is the same data that it reads today? Because maybe it got changed manually. Maybe it does. I'm sure nobody did that in production, changing stuff manually in a database. No, that never happens. So why do standards matter? Well, first of all, they provide both consistency and efficiency. They give you proven methods to reach either regulatory compliance or to build your internal processes. And they've gone through the test of time. There's some examples there. You might have heard of ISO 27001 or NIST or COBIT or whatever. They're there because in some ways they work. Now, the problem with a lot of companies is they think it's all or nothing. And it rarely is. Any of those standards, you can just use 10, 20% of that. Not 100%, but go for the low-hanging fruits. Use the Pareto law, the 20% of things you do covering 80% of your issues. Just try doing that. It's not an overnight thing, so implementing some of those standards is definitely going to help. Then there's best practices and emerging best practices, such as zero trust or attack surface management, stuff of that nature. You need to be up to date with what's going on with the trends and how to protect yourself against some of the trends, right, that are out there when it comes to cybersecurity attacks. And incorporate those standards in your strategy. But for that, you first need to understand what the standards are all about, to do a gap analysis, try to figure out where you are and where you should be, develop a plan to get there. So plan the plan and then do the plan. That's where most stuff fails. And then do continuous monitoring and improvement. Check if the way you've reached your initial goal is enough or whether you need to still adapt on the fly. And that's more than often the case. So when it comes to having someone in your company do that, traditionally that's been the role of a chief information security officer, right? So what's this whole trend that's been popping up for like 5, 10 years now out in the industry with a virtual CISO? And I tried to kind of put together a comparison of the difference between the two. When you have a traditional in-house CISO, you usually have them around full time, right? They're not going to be there like every other Thursday from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m., right? So they're around full time. That, in some cases, if they don't have much to do, it might involve a higher cost. If you're a smaller company or a smaller team and you just need that kind of an insight on a case-by-case basis every now and then, it's typically less expensive to just go for paying for what you need when you need it, and then stopping there. Now, when it comes to availability, like I said, it's full-time, set hours. You might be able to get a virtual CISO, which is more often than not a team rather than a person, to be available even 24/7 for you. Like you send out an email, and you get a response based on the severity of the issue, based on the current SLA that you've agreed with the provider, based on the experience and expertise needed to fix that issue that you're facing right now, you'll get the best answer possible, right? So you can expect that. And that's where the expertise comes in. More often than not, whether it's a team or a person, simply the fact that they're working with multiple customers in multiple industries, multiple verticals, with multiple types of environments and internal issues and whatnot, they see a lot more stuff than you might see just inside one company with one set of processes, and you've been there forever and you kind of understand how that works, but you didn't interact with like the rest of the world out there. So they can bring that expertise in that your people inside the company might not have because they've never faced that issue. And the fact that another customer of theirs has faced an issue and they now know about it and they can help you figure that out or prevent that from occurring, that's of huge help. It's the same principle with using any sort of antivirus tool, right? Or anti-malware or intrusion detection. If some other customer has been unlucky enough to be the first target of said malware, and they've done the research and they figured out, hey, this is a new type of attack, and they've added a signature to their system, and your system, because you're using the same tool, gets an update, you are now protected against something that someone else dealt with, right? It's kind of similar here. When it comes to resource management, you do have to go through the full HR lifecycle to kind of hire and get someone on board to be your CISO, right? Well, you don't have to really do that when you're working with an external provider. The perspective may tend to be a lot more unbiased because they haven't been there since forever, since the beginning. And more often than not, it's the CISO that's responsible for thinking of the strategy and somehow also ensuring that the strategy and the tools and the solutions are well implemented. And then at the end of the day, if it's the same person who plans and does the job, which is unfortunately happening more often than I'd like to see in the industry, it's the same person that's responsible for doing things and for checking that the things are done properly. When you ask them, has this been done? Are they gonna tell you, no, I've done a shitty job and it's kind of half-assed and it's not working that great? No, they're going to be like, yes, I've done the best I could and we're good now, right? So having that external view, that external validation can help. Scaling, now when it comes to scaling, that might be a lot more challenging to do it with internal resources, whereas using an external resource might help you in that endeavor because they need to figure out, hey, you need 2-3 more people to implement or secure or respond to an incident. We can maybe find that inside our team or whatever. And then on the responsibility side, yes, if they're internal, they kind of take on a lot more of the accountability internally than anyone external, so you need to kind of think about that. But what are the roles, right? So what does a vCISO do? Is anyone here a Chief Information Security Officer or works with one? Okay. So I guess this is new information, that's why you're here, right? So these are just some of the things that a Chief Information Security Officer does, right, or would do on a day-to-day basis. And not always all of them, and not always all of them on the same day, right? But it's part of what they would probably do or what you'd expect them to do, right? And you see, there's a lot of stuff there. Putting this on one person or a small team might be an issue, right? So that's another place where having that kind of external validation might help. So why would you hire, a virtual CISO, right? And there's the cost-benefit analysis, right? So you can look at cutting down some costs or just looking at the ROI. If you're able to prevent a data breach that will end up costing you millions, that might just be it, right? Or even if it's just validation, you might already have a team or a CISO internally, but how someone to validate any idea? So I've put together this strategy, but I'm doing it for the first time. I need some external validation. Like, can you also take a look at this? You've probably done this in the past. I'm doing it for the first time. Is it right? Have I thought of everything? Is there something that I've missed, kind of a thing? And yes, they can provide that increased cybersecurity posture, providing, I already mentioned, the objective perspective coming from the outside, the expert guidance, and kind of a broad exposure to other stuff. So choosing the right CISO, you need to look at the skills, the qualifications, to ensure that they're the right fit for you. And more than the skills and qualifications, I think the strategic alignment matters a lot more. Make sure that they understand your business and your business needs before you engage with them. It's not like, hey, I need security, you do security, we're good, right? It's a bit more than that. So even when it comes to the questions, try to assess their experience. So what have you done in the past? How would you do this thing or that thing? And go with scenarios, like we need an incident response policy. We don't have one. How would you build one, knowing what you know about us? Let's look at the strategy. What sort of changes do you see as being viable in our current strategy? Industry specific, if it's something that's specific to your industry, do they have that industry knowledge that you need, and so on. So I'll give you a few examples, and then I'm going to be done. First one, a big data provider in the US. I've worked with them for a little over 10 years now. Their internal skill set usually revolves around like data, right? Collecting, processing data, selling data, that's how they make their money. But they never had the knowledge and expertise to manage the infrastructure, helping them to do that, to sell their services. So I've worked with them over the years. Most of the stuff that I've done for them revolved around infrastructure management, incident prevention, as much as possible, right, with data breaches, because it just takes one, usually, to just go down with the business. Security posture assessment, compliance stuff, policies, and things like that. And it's been a 10+ year long engagement with them. It's stuff that we've been doing together, and they've always come to us, to me and my team, to kind of help them with whatever showed up. Because they're not a cybersecurity company. They're a big data company. They do data, but the security side, they'd rather have someone else do it. Another example, this is from early last year. A single source supplier of pipeline construction, sewer rehabilitation. They're active in 4 countries around Europe. They came to me after going through a data breach with significant financial losses, and the customer wanted kind of a one-off assessment. So let's look at what happened and how we can prevent this from happening again, kind of a thing. They already had their internal team to kind of implement any changes, so we came back with a list of recommendations. We told them this is what happened, this is how it could have been prevented. But the worst thing that ended up in that report was they were already paying for a lot of the stuff that could have prevented what happened. They were just not using it. They hadn't configured that stuff. So that's the biggest learning that they came out of that. So you see some of the stuff mentioned there. They already had the licenses and everything for that. It was just like it was missing a checkbox somewhere. The last example, this is a fairly recent one, past autumn, Global Research Institute. They went through a business email compromise, so someone paid an invoice, a 6-figure invoice, in a different account, the hacker's account. That was a costly lesson. So we helped them with the initial incident investigation. We helped them onboard a clearer process on how to prevent these kinds of things, clarified and documented how this happened, looked at the cyber kill chain, like where the attack originated, It was like stuff like Nigeria, Vietnam, and kind of a distributed team because they needed that. The findings report that they received came with some recommendations. We provided some assistance, some advisory with that, and then I even did a training with some of their C-level and upper management to kind of help ensure that this thing doesn't happen. So that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today. It's what I could fit in the short amount of time left. I don't know if we've got time for maybe one
a short
question.
One. Yeah, if there's someone ready in the room. Yeah, we have one.
So if I want to be a security expert, how can I start?
With this question. So that's the first step. The answer might be longer or shorter. You kind of need to figure out why would you want to do this in the first place. And then there's a whole bunch of resources out there. If you really want to do it, you won't have a problem doing it. But you need to find the passion for it. It's very different from being a developer where you can easily kind of wait around if a new version of a framework or like programming language came out. It's okay because you're still working on a project that's like 2 versions behind and you're good. In cybersecurity, if a new type of attack comes out today and you don't know about it today, you might have to update your resume tomorrow. So you need to be comfortable with that because it's a lot more dynamic. But if you like that, if you like the challenge, this is where you want to be. There's many different areas in cybersecurity where you can go to, whether it's, compliance and forensics and kind of doing pen tests and things like that. So it's very varied in and of itself. But the first step is the question that you asked. Try asking ChatGPT or Google. I'm sure you'll have a very, very good first start.
Hi. How often do you face the second example you gave? I mean, for me it makes sense that when you are in a company which doesn't pay any attention to this, you are supposed to be under an attack and a successful attack. But I'm just curious how many or how successful the attacks are when you still have somebody handling this.
Okay, so there's 2 parts to this. One, if someone wants to hack you, it's not a matter of if they can hack you, it's a matter of when. So it's just a matter of time. If you're unlucky enough to be the victim of such an attack, that's it. To answer your point, how often does this happen? More often than a lot of companies would like to admit. More often than not, they like to hide this stuff and it's not made public at all. It's only made public if it's really, really bad or really, really obvious. But I'd say about 95% of my engagements come as a result of a data breach, of an attack, of someone having learned a very expensive life lesson that you need to do security differently. And that's when they ask for training. That's when they ask for, usually they ask for, is there any way we could hit Control-Z on this, right? Undo. That's unfortunately not possible in most cases. Like, can we kind of just go back to the week before when we didn't know about this thing? But more often than not, unfortunately, they need to go through some really bad incident for them to start caring about cybersecurity. They usually fail to learn from the competition, from other companies next to them, how to prevent these kinds of things. So it's only, I would say, about 5% of companies that come to us and say, hey, we just want to make sure, we just want to prevent. And usually after data breaches, when they ask for training, when they ask for advisory, when they ask for stuff. And there's a lot of those, so it's not like I'm getting bored, but it's more often than not like I'm putting out fires than trying to prevent stuff. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Tudi. Thank you. Let's give a round of applause. Thank you. Thank you for being once again at this event and for your passionate knowledge sharing.